Hospital Port as pride and dignity. Stop the New World Order. Welcome to Hapanwo TV. Hapanwo TV, and welcome to this watch party of Moment of Contact, a film by James Fox that has just recently been released. And this is the first time I've actually done a watch party, a full-length, full-format watch party, 3 parts, on a newly released film. But now I've done it, and this is the second part of the 3 parts. As you know, my watch parties consist of an introduction, which I've done. Link in the description box as always, the review, which is now, and then the live stream. So this is the review. Now, as I said, it's probably best to watch the film before watching this review, although spoilers, I know spoilers are a little bit redundant, but because most of you probably know the story, know the case. However, despite that, there is some new information in this particular video, which, you know, it's a shame to sort of give away now, but you've had a couple of weeks to watch it. So what we'll do is now we'll talk about the actual film. It's by James Fox. Now, James Fox he's rapidly becoming one of the biggest names in what you might call UFO wood, because his previous film, The Phenomenon, which I watched, is become a bit of a classic, and I was impressed with it. I must admit, I was impressed with this particular film. It was really quite something. It's about established cases. There were no new cases in The Phenomenon. It was all ones I'm familiar with, but it included a lot of exclusive new material on those particular cases, and that is very important. So, for example, there was some amateur footage from the Lonnie Zamora incident, not of the actual event, but of the aftermath, people searching the area, things like that, finding the footprints, the famous photo of the footprints and things like that. And of course, there was the absolutely exclusive interview, for the first time in 55 years, an exclusive interview with Mr. Greenwood, the science teacher from the Westall School in Australia. He broke his silence. I mean, as I said before, it's interesting to speculate on what's made him come forward now. And it's probably a result of the general climactic tectonic shift in the way UFOs are portrayed and how they are a part of our lives now. I was eagerly awaiting this particular film because I was impressed with The Phenomenon, and also I'm aware of James Fox now. He's kind of established himself, as I said, this great UFO filmmaker on UFO documentaries. Moment of Contact. It's about the Virginia incident of 1996, which I've described in the introduction, and which indeed you people probably already know about. There was quite a fanfare actually when this film dropped. It was, everyone was going off and trying to get a hold of it, and I thought that some of the sites might crash as a result. I managed to get it. I managed to get it on Amazon Prime. It was working. At first I was concerned because it wasn't appearing on People Report. It's not appearing in Norway. It's not appearing in Denmark and places like that. And apparently that was down to some technical problem, because I was a bit concerned at first it might only be on the US Amazon, which would be annoying because then I'd have to go to Vimeo or something and get it cost more money on Vimeo. And it's actually the cheapest option is Amazon Prime in the UK, £9.99. Now there's no rental option, which is a bit annoying. I'm not quite sure why that is. I managed to rent The Phenomenon. But I mean, I don't know exactly why that's the case, but there you go. So it's worth buying. It is worth purchasing. Actually, I mean, yeah, it's like the Ruhr case. What's it called? What was the name of the Ruhr case? The thing by Randall Nickerson. I reviewed it. Aerial Phenomenon. That's it. Aerial Phenomenon. That was quite expensive. I remember. It was worth watching. So is this worth £9.99? £10 in other words, minus a penny. Is it worth a tenner to watch this? Absolutely. It's But this is very different. It's a very different film style to the phenomenon. It moves away from the kind of classic documentary, more to the kind of touring documentary. So it's a bit. It's more. It's less kind of. Yeah, it's less kind of Adam Curtis. It's more kind of John Ronson without the silly jokes. Yeah, so what happens is James Fox actually goes to Brazil and he's followed. Most of the filming is from a handheld unit, your camera, sound man, things like that. And he goes to investigate this personally in Brazil. He flies to Brazil. Now, this film, of course, has been made over the last couple of years, which means it was made. He worked through the COVID-19 lockdown to get this done, and that can't have been easy. He must have had the V word. I mean, how he feels about that, I don't know. Maybe he thought he'd risk it because to get this film done because he thought the film was so important, or maybe he just doesn't mind, like some people in ufology don't. But either way, he must have had V words and tests coming out of his arse to get this done. And of course, in some of the places they're wearing masks, which is a bit disconcerting. Although it was probably unavoidable. Now, Virginia today has made something of a. It's made something of a. This is where a lot of the skeptics start getting their arse into. They start getting their arse, getting all arsey and bitchy. Okay, and indeed, I think I addressed this into the introduction, but I'm going to address it again. There's nothing immoral about a location. Exploiting its own history for its own prosperity. Now, Virginia has become like a UFO mecca, to use the patronising language of the Skeppers, like Roswell. You go to Roswell today and there are tourist shops everywhere. Skeppers like Mark Pilkington described them in lurid, absolutely excruciating detail. You can almost feel him gritting his teeth with frustration and anger. So yeah, it's Virginia's on a smaller scale is getting a bit like that. Virginia is has a UFO tourist scene, which includes a water tower shaped like a flying saucer, and it's called. It's actually called. What's it called? It's called. Sorry if I mispronounced this. Disco Voador, which literally means flying saucer. It's also sometimes called Nave Espacial, which again I may mispronounce. I can't speak Portuguese. I know Portuguese apparently is a very, very difficult language in terms of its phonetics to get right. Something it shares in common with Dutch and Welsh, which I do speak to a certain extent. But Portuguese again has difficult phonetics. So I won't try to pronounce words I really feel I can't articulate. But Disco Voador and Nave Espacial just means spaceship. But it's often called that, and it's shaped like a UFO, and that is deliberate. It doesn't have an official name, but it's the people who put it up there deliberately made it look like a UFO. There's actually graffiti just near it, and if you go to Google Earth, I don't know if it's still there, but there's some murals which depict like caricature comic versions of the alien that was seen. And of course we are talking about a CE3 crash retrieval type event. There's the submarine minibus that came down, and then naughty old Russell here was seen walking the streets, weren't you, Russell? Yeah, it was him all along. Actually, it didn't look like Russell. It was it had. Well, I think I described it in the previous video. It was like a grey, but it had a sort of reddish brown, oily skin, red eyes, lots of veins on its body. The skin appeared greasy and moist, as if almost like an amphibious skin. And it had bright red eyes. So it had grey-like features, but it was a grey type. Well, there were apparently 3 of these things. 2 were captured. But of course, one appeared a couple of months later at a zoo. That's very interesting. There's some new information in this film you might not have heard before. But one thing I should add, actually, this film is, I think this film is historical for many reasons, and one of the things it has an interview. I think I said this in the introduction. I'm going to repeat it again with the wonderful, the late, the great Stanton T. Friedman. It's got an interview with Stanton T. Friedman, and I think that's. I don't know specifically. It may well be the last interview he ever gave, because before I think it was about 2 years ago he died. He died in an airport when he was on his way home from a UFO conference. I think that's how he would have liked to have gone out, old Stan. And there's two brief clips of him doing an interview, with Fox. Now, I'm pointing out there's nothing. And I mean, it's almost obvious actually, because we'd know otherwise, even if you hadn't seen it. There's nothing in this film that is truly revolutionary, but it adds to that pile, the pile of disclosure, as I call it. It gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, until eventually, once it reaches a certain point, there'll be I think disclosure is going to happen just by simply through small increments rather than one single big bombshell. Yeah, I think so. I think that's actually there will be. I think it adds to that possibility of achieving a critical mass. Now, this film is set in rural inland Brazil. I won't say I said rural. I did a written review of this actually, which I'm actually reading. I'm actually using it for notes right now. It's set in rural. I said rural Brazil, kind of inland Brazil. It's actually a town. Varginha is a town of I think it was. I've said how many 100,000 people it had. I suppose it's slightly smaller than Oxford, where I live, which has 180,000. Varginha is a town. It's surrounded by farmland. It's rural Brazil, which means it's unlike. I mean, I don't know Brazil. I've never been to Brazil, but if it's like other countries, what you'll find is large coastal cities tend to be more cosmopolitan, because they're large cities, because they're on the coast, because they're regulated. They have a tradition of interaction with other cultures through seafaring. They tend to be more cosmopolitan. I don't know, but I reckon if you go to, say, Sao Paulo or Rio de Janeiro and these other coastal cities, you'll find probably people who are probably more different kinds of people from other parts of the world. Probably a lot of people speak English, things like that. You go inland. This is inland Brazil. It's much more. It's not. It's off. Leaving aside the moderate tourist sector. Varginha doesn't have a tourist industry. It's industrial farming, things like that. The people there are. I don't want to say. I suppose you could use derogatory language, which are metaphors for other countries like peasants or yokels. You'd use those. That's the words you'd use for my country, the United Kingdom. You'd say peasants or yokels. In the United States, you'd say hicks, hillbillies, rednecks, etc. We have slightly insulting names for people who are very native and very isolated from the rest of the world, who tend to occupy less built-up areas of countries. But I don't mean to be derogatory at all. There's nothing wrong with these people at all. There's nothing. I don't want to insult them or anything like that. But because they tend to be more insular, which means none of them spoke English, which meant that the dialogue of this film was almost entirely in Portuguese. But that's not a problem, because James Fox had a live translator with him, very glamorous-looking lady actually, with big false eyelashes, sort of kind of like a dark mixed race kind of woman, very, as I say, glamorous, well dressed, attractive, very typically Brazilian actually. She went round everywhere with him. There was also a local ufologist as well, a couple of local ufologists as well. He did a lot of interview with local ufologists. There's an interview with A.J. Javad. I just want to say, I don't know how many of you saw my video or Roswell upon Avon. I actually did an article called Roswell upon Avon. It just goes into more details about the whole, the tourist shops, aren't they awful? All these UFO museums and things like that, aren't they terrible? All the UFO tat you get. God, they're making a lot of money off this. In fact, someone put something like this in the comments section. Well, in that case, you need to go to Stratford-on-Avon and tell them to get rid of all the Shakespeare stuff. Go and close it all down. Shut those theatres, shut the museum. All those tourist shops selling the, leather-bound scripts of Romeo and Juliet, all those tacky little glow-in-the-dark Hamlet skulls. Throw them all out. Because it's immoral. It's immoral, skeptics, isn't it? For a town or city or location to use its own history for its prosperity, to cater for the inevitable interest it's going to have. But of course the skeptics, they don't. So, but it's different. Shakespeare was real. Well, this might be, If you listen to my interview with Nick Colostrum, you might find that Shakespeare wasn't real. But that's a story for another time. But no, they'll say Shakespeare is real, assuming he is. Shakespeare is real. But what if this is real as well? What if there really was an alien in Virginia, in Brazil? What if there really was an alien? Because that's what the evidence suggests. Now, the dialogue. Sorry, the dialogue being. I'll go back to the language again. Sorry, the dialogue being in Portuguese. I must say the dialogue is almost entirely in Portuguese, but the subtitles are quite good actually. They're big. They're easy to read. They stay on the screen for a long time. They're in simple language. So that's okay. I think it's okay to have that. There's no alternative really for a place like Virginia. If you're in a place like Virginia, but it's quite funny actually because now this I consider this a far better crash retrieval case than Roswell in terms of evidence, because the problem with Roswell is that nothing actually happened for 31 years. It was the UFO crash retrieval that time forgot. I know it is kind of it's still working. It is actually the definitive UFO event. Pardon me, but the name of the city nearby was the name given to everyone. It was the name given to the whole gamut, the whole particular sector of ufology. It was named the Roswell. You get like Brazilian Roswell, which this is called the Brazilian Roswell, Welsh Roswell, etc., etc. This is actually a Roswell in the literal sense. In other words, it's a CE3 crash retrieval. But it's evidentially it's much better than Roswell. Roswell, like I said, nothing happened until 1978, and suddenly, Stanton Friedman's doing a lecture. He's approached by Jesse Marcel Sr., who said, I want to tell you about this, and the meeting was arranged. And basically, everything we know about Roswell, including Charles Bullitt's and William Moore's first book, comes from that. Literally, Roswell, the whole modern Roswell craze began at that moment. But by then, of course, the moment that happened, Stan and lots of other people headed straight there and started to interview people. 31 years takes its toll. Some of the witnesses die. A lot of them get old and they can't remember. I mean, what was I doing 31 years ago? I mean, I could remember it, but it was like, it's worth just trying to experiment what you were doing 31 years ago. What were you doing in 1991, guys? Have a think about it. Let me think. It's difficult. And what you do remember will probably not be. It'll be different from what other people remember. There'll be the inevitable distortions of memory, the conflation. I'm not going to get into the Mandela effect now. But this is different. As soon as it happened, news reports started coming out, and people like A.J. Javad and all these other researchers, they all started heading. They headed for the area. They interviewed the girls. The girls were literally interviewed days after they had their experience. And as we'll see, I mean, there's some actual. As always, James Fox always puts new material into his films, even if it's about an existing case. And indeed, there's some fascinating footage with John Mack interviewing some of the witnesses, which is John Mack actually interviewed them because he actually went there, and this has never been published until now. It's in this film. It's in Moment of Contact, and he did pretty much like what he did at. It's pretty much like what he did in Rua. He went and he talked to people and things like he talked to the girls and things like that. When James Fox arrives in Virginia, it's quite funny actually. He begins his research with the simplest method imaginable. He stands on street corners holding placards saying in Portuguese, "Did you remember what happened here in 1996? The aliens and everything like that." And all the Virginian public start coming up to him on the street because they all remember it. It's a massive part of local folklore. I use the word when I say folklore, I don't mean something that's not real. It is simply a part of local culture now. It's part of popular history. And of course, they've all heard about it. and they all people coming up to him all the time, talking about him, talking about these things. And one of the people who came up and spoke to him was the mayor of Virginia, who is a believer. And I know the skeptics will say, well, he has to be, doesn't he? Because it's tourism and stuff. Tourism. I mean, they said that about because apparently the mayor of Roswell is a big UFO believer. All the mayors of Roswell have been big UFO believers since 1978. But because the tourism, because the town is now dependent on, well, it's not dependent, but it's become very prosperous because of the UFO tourism. By the way, it's something I hope to do at some point. I hope to go to Roswell at some point. It's on my list of things to do, on my bucket list, as they say. So I'll be contributing to that. I might even see if I can take a quick trip to Virginia while I'm at it. Now, it's some of the questions in the existing case remain mysteries. Some have been answered, and they have been answered. Now, like the minibus submarine UFO, this is how it's been described. It's shaped. The witnesses in the farm because there was a crash. You see, it was actually a little way from Virginia, a few miles from Virginia, and there was a crash. Excuse me. A UFO described as looking like a submarine. Now, this could mean a cigar-shaped object. It could mean, because submarines are kind of cigar-shaped, aren't they? Or it could mean something that was disc-shaped, looked from a certain angle. Described as being the size of a minibus. That sounds quite small, but then when you're actually seeing something, just checking. Oh God, got to check my. I need a director in the gallery. When you're looking at something in the sky, it's often hard to judge its actual size if you don't know its range. I find that sometimes planes fly over, I look up and they look very small, and they look quite close. Now, there's a guy interviewed in 1996 called Carlos de Souza, and he takes them to the exact location. Now, this is something that's never been known before. This is completely new. But after going around a while, because he's not been back there. He's not been back there for all these years. 20, 25 odd years plus, and but he finds it. He finds the exact spot where the UFO came down, and it was a classic thing. He actually saw it happen. He was driving along the road nearby, and he saw some commotion. So he parked the car and he looked over, and he saw basically something on the ground. There was lots of soldiers around it, armed men, and he went closer to have a look. He couldn't get too close because the military cordon. He was scared of the guys with the guns, but it was near a farm, and then there was the alien seen by, and then what happens? And he's quite emotional, Carlos de Souza. He starts crying, because it's obviously like it's affected him deeply. This thing, and he's probably been living with this for a long time. It's affected him. He was quite emotional, this guy. And then, of course, James, the next stage, what happened after that, after the minibus submarine thing came down, was the encounter in Virginia. These three girls, Katia, Lilian, and Valqueira. They were walking, two young girls, Lilian, Valqueira. Lilian, I think, was 16, Valqueira 14. Katia was a bit older, I think she was in her mid-20s. They were just walking along through the town. They take a shortcut through this little. It's like a grassy alleyway between the buildings, where you can actually. It's a shortcut into the. If you look at the geography of the area, you'll see that there's a wooded valley besides Jardim. There's a place called Jardim Anderay, which is where the encounters in the city happened. And between Jardim Anderay and there's something called Marcel's Gym, which is like a gym for men, and it's on the other side of this long road. And in fact, one of the witnesses was on his way to that gym on that day. There's a wooded valley with a road connecting Jardim Anderay to the eastern side of Virginia. And these girls wanted to cross the valley. They were taking a shortcut through this this little grassy alley, but it's about. I measured it. I measured it at about 75 feet across. It's now like it's been built around. Nothing. This is very, very odd. It used to be like a passageway between the buildings where you could get into the valley. Now there's a house in the way that's been built since then. So the alleyway's been blocked off by another building. Now what's funny is it's essentially now a vacant slot, which presumably it's owned by somebody, and somebody could build there if they wanted. They could actually sell. They could someone could gain planning permission. You could actually have a building there. But funny enough, it's never been built on. It's been left. It's basically a patch of grass-covered waste ground. And the funny thing is, someone's put up a wall between the street near the street where the girls where you entered it, and it's got a locked door, which is a locked gate, which is very strange, to prevent entry, and it's got a padlock on it, which is that to me is very odd. Um, it's very very odd. I mean, I don't know if Fox actually went and looked to see if he could find out who owned the land and asked permission. But someone comes to, he says, "I know a guy who's got a special key," and this bloke turns up with an axe and basically smashes the padlock off. I don't know if they had to deal with the police after that. And so they all go in there, Katya and Lilian Valkyria, and Lilian Valkyria's mum, who of course was the lady who came to the scene afterwards, and because the girl said they'd seen a demon, and she actually saw the footprint of the creature. But they go in there, they recreate the entire experience, and they point to the exact spot where the creature was crouching by the wall. You can actually see it because there's some holes in the wall. There's some graffiti that's still there, still visible, and they basically recreate the whole thing. And then the girls and the mum talk through their experience of that day, and the mother draws the footprint. The footprint is really strange. It has like a little toe like that. Then it has two big toes. There's three toes on the foot. And that's not human. That's definitely not human. And that's very important because that information is corroborated later on by another witness. Now, there was a military cordon in Virginia that day. Now, this is where it gets a bit odd because there was a couple of a lot of people asked about this, and there's a Lieutenant Colonel Pereira of the ESA. Now, the ESA is it's a military academy. It's actually not a frontline base, which may explain why there were some problems, with basically the security of the operation was compromised so badly, because there was a lot of personnel there who really didn't know how to handle this. In fact, I don't think I wouldn't be surprised if no one really in the Brazilian military has had any training for situations like this, except perhaps maybe the specialised detachments which dealt with it later. There appears to be these detachments in every country. There was a press conference after the girls were interviewed, and Lieutenant Colonel Pereira, he was the commandant of the base. He actually came on stage and he said, "No, there's nothing wrong here. There was because the streets near where the creature was captured were cordoned off for several hours." And he said, no, that's just normal. We were just doing exercises. And the local people were saying, "Well, you never come into the city. What were all these army lorries doing driving along the streets of Virginia?" And he says, "We always do that. That's just normal operations." And they said, "No, it's not. I don't remember seeing." The local people say, "That's not. I don't remember seeing army lorries driving along our streets." And then he said, "Got nothing more to say." And then he said, "The press conference is over. Goodbye," and he walks out. But it contradicts what he said. So here we go. I'm just going through my notes here. The next thing, what happened after that was the girls, of course, after they fled the area, and when they came back, the creature had gone, but the footprint was there, which the mother remembers and drew a picture of for Fox. Actually, she was there. She drew it on his clipboard. Then there was the incident with Marco Ceresi. I called him Paolo Ceresi wrongly in the introduction. Apologies for that. Now he was a policeman on patrol with his fellow officer, a guy called Eric Lopes, and he comes into the story later, by the way. Eric and Marco driving along, doing a standard patrol, in their like squad car, and then they get a message to go to Jardim André, and they go there and they find the creature. And how it actually happens, I'm not quite exactly sure. See, there are other documentaries that talk about this as well, but they stop the car nearby. It's another grassy area, not the one where the girls were, but one a couple of 100 yards away. And this creature runs out across the road, and And then Cherezi gets out and he goes after it and he captures it. Brave guy. Especially in Brazil, like I said at the beginning. Brazil tends to get all the nasty ones, doesn't it? It tends to get all the horrible cases. And indeed, this unfortunately is no exception, because they took the creature to the Hospital Regional and then it was moved to the Hospital Humanitas. Again, there was all this confusion. There was a massive amount of propaganda backfilling, as I explained in the introduction. For example, the local newspaper. I'll repeat this just to give you for those of you to remind you. The local newspaper actually published an article. It was a congratulations to Mr. and Mrs. So and So, two lovely Virginians who had a baby last night at the Hospital Humanitas, and they had their first child. And guess what? The husband is he's 4 feet tall, and the wife is 3.5 feet tall. They're both very small. They're a small couple, basically. And so that apparently is that. That apparently is what explains the sightings of aliens in the hospital, because they were people saw these two tiny people, these two tiny short-term people, and thought that they were this woman with a pregnant belly and stuff like that, and they thought they were the aliens. So I think I can tell the difference between a pregnant woman and an alien. However, even if she's really short, I can tell the difference between her and an alien. It's like with Mudinho. I was talking about Mudinho, which means the little mute. Mudinho is a local. He's a local man, a vulnerable adult, mentally impaired. His name, Mudinho, is a nickname. It means the little mute man. That's what the girls called him. See, again, they said, Mudinho was just hanging around there, and the girls saw him. But see, they knew him. They already knew Mudinho. I mean, his parents were interviewed in another documentary. Mudinho himself is a vulnerable adult and didn't appear, but his parents were interviewed, and they said, oh yeah, they know him. Katia used to give him cigarettes. So why didn't they just say, hi Mudinho, and walk off? But no, they ran... But no, they looked at him and thought he was an alien. Well, unless these girls have been taking acid or something, which of course some skeptics are going to suggest at some point. Right, now, there's also an interview with a lady who is called Mrs. Tavares. What's her name? I can't remember her first name. Mrs. Tavares. She is the sister of Marco Cherezi, because what happened to Marco Cherezi when he picked this creature up? He basically he just carried it in his lap to the hospital. I don't know what he was thinking at the time. He immediately fell ill. He became very ill. He was admitted, and there's an interview with the doctor who treated him in this film, and the doctor describes his various symptoms. You know, it's like there's something toxic on this creature. And once, because he'd been holding this creature with his bare hands, he said there was he felt greasy. Like some of the grease on the creature's skin got onto his, and it poisoned him, basically. And as I said, Mrs. Tavares is trying to get justice for her brother, Marco Cherezi. And she's been campaigning for that, because, as I explained in the introduction, this guy was buried straight away. There was no, and I think he was in a hermetically sealed coffin, and they said, and the parents weren't allowed to see the body. No one was allowed to see the body. Just buried straight away. I'm surprised they didn't cremate him. No post-mortem was done. Nothing at all. No PM report. No path report. Nothing. Now that's suspicious in itself. The doctor was just told. The doctor's just told, gave a list of symptoms. No obvious cause. Marco Cherezi died just a couple of days in intensive care after handling this creature, and he was a fit young guy. He was I think he was 21 or something. He's a very fit young guy, obviously. And his sister, Mrs. Tavares, is trying to campaign for justice. Oddly enough, Mrs. Tavares looks very much like that other great ufological heroine, Brenda Butler. They look very similar. If you see her and look at a picture of Brenda Butler, they look very similar. I couldn't help noticing. Now there were a couple of new witnesses. Now the first were a family that lived nearby, and they wanted to remain nameless. They were blurred out, but The father apparently is a local doctor, and he's concerned for his reputation. But this is very interesting. They saw a UFO. They saw lights in the sky. They saw some kind of disc-shaped object flying close to the ground, shining light down into Jardim Andrei. Now, it's almost as if it was looking for something or someone. It was looking for the aliens that had just maybe fled the crash site. Stanton Friedman, he speculates a lot sometimes, and he said, "Oh, these weren't the pilots. These guys, these aliens that wandering the streets, they weren't the pilots. They were like the Lodies or something. They were the cabin crew." I mean, I don't know. Interesting idea, but I don't know. I don't think Stan can prove or disprove that. So this interestingly, there's that's it's interesting. These people were like, these are new witnesses that have come forward. Seen shortly afterwards, they saw a UFO in the evening coming down, shining. It looks like it was shining a light down onto the ground, looking for the aliens. Now, there's also another interview with a radiographer from the hospital. Said he did an X-ray on one of the aliens, and he was later told not to tell him. He was threatened with Greek buggery if he so much as breathed a word of what he's seen by the various sort of men in black and military types who were there. Now I can't wonder if maybe this is the surgeon that Timothy Good talks about in his book. Is it Need to Know? He's written so many books I've lost count. But in one of the books he talks about the Virginia incident. Now, according to Good, this guy's a surgeon, but I can't wonder if it was actually the radiographer, and he covered up his own identity. He covered up his own identity in order to protect himself. So he said he was a radiographer, he said he was a surgeon, not a radiographer. Now, and so this is another witness that the body. This is not the only witness that the body. At least one of the aliens, because there were two wandering the streets. At least one of the aliens was actually taken to Hospital Humanitas and was examined as a patient would be. The weirdest patient ever seen. Now there's another. The most interesting new witness is a man codenamed. They just call him Military X. He's filmed from behind. His voice is distorted, so he can't be recognised. His identity is very carefully respected. But he said he was a soldier in 1996, and he said he was at his base. He didn't say which base, and he was ordered at 9 in the morning to assemble for a special operation into Virginia. And so they go in. They were ordered to follow this like camper van into Virginia. Who was in why a camper van? Who it was? I don't know who was in the camper van. What it was? I don't know. My guess it's Brazilian Secret Service, the intelligence. They went into Virginia, and these two lorries followed this camper van. There's a photograph allegedly taken from the lorry of the camper van. It's pretty interesting. It's very poor quality. You can't see the number plate or anything. But I think that's very interesting. And they went to the Humanitas Hospital. They backed the lorries into the back of the loading bay of the hospital, and they went in there, and this guy, Military X, reports that there was a creature in the box. He could see its feet, and he describes the feet, and guess what? They look exactly like the description of the footprint that Liliana Valqueira's mum drew. Brown coloured, oily skin. He says it's this classic thing. He could only see, it was covered in a drape. You could only see its feet. There was a drape over the top of it. You'd only see the feet and lower legs. And then one of the others, there was a guy there with a film camera, like a VCR recorder, the type they used to use in the 90s, one of the big ones, which you put the VCR cassette into. And anyone younger than me doesn't know what I'm talking about. Okay. But VCR video, yeah. Do you remember VHS video? How many people remember it? Okay, if you don't remember it, can you imagine Netflix in a black plastic brick? That's a VHS. Got it, kids? And so then they were ordered to. This is where, and he says, what happened after that? Well, they took it to the ESA base. This is the academy. Again, with no real idea about what the hell they were going to do with it. It's not the sort of thing that facility normally does. And then it was basically handled by another unit. Now, what's interesting is that all the men that Military X knew in the garrison were shortly afterwards transferred out. So basically, the unit he was involved in was disbanded effectively, and everyone was transferred to another unit after that mission to pick up the alien. I thought, that's very odd. I mean, it could be. I don't know if that's standard practice. I don't know how many of you guys have been in the army, but let me know if you know exactly what's going on here, and there's another explanation for it. But to me, it sounds like this was in order to prevent them talking to each other and exchanging ideas and maybe forming some kind of group that might come out into the open. But Military X never saw some of these guys ever again. I hope that nothing happened to them in the sense of they had little accidents and things like that. Because, I mean, Military X is still alive, so this wasn't an attempt to dispose of them. Then, what happens then? Then, this is where it gets... This is one of the most dramatic parts of the film. Now, Marco Teresi died. His sister's, spoken to the media a lot. His ex-wife has also been very vocal, trying to get justice for her ex-husband. One guy who's never spoken is Eric Lepech, who was he was in the patrol car with Marco. This was his kind of supervisor in the police. Now, Fox manages to discover where Eric Lepech is. Now, Eric Lepech has never talked. He's very carefully guards his privacy. He's never spoken to the Teresi family. He's never spoken to the media. So they go and see him. Now, he lives in a farm somewhere, and so Fox and his team, there was the camera crew and the translator and the other ufologists. They all go. Maybe it wasn't the best way to do it, but a group of about 20 of them in 2 cars go and see Eric Lepech. Now, Eric Lepech lives in a little farm. Now, it looks like a farm to me. As they go up the driveway in 2 cars. As I said, this is probably not the best way to approach a new witness. And then they get out and they go over now, and the guy looks out the window and he says, Eric, I'm a friend of Eric's. He doesn't want to talk to you. If it's about the ET thing, he doesn't want to talk to you. It's interesting he volunteered that information. If it's about the ET, they didn't actually, Fox and the others didn't say they were there for the UFO alien business. Even before the guy in the window says straight away, Eric, I'm a friend of Eric's. If it's about the ET business, he doesn't want to talk to you. And what's more, you're trespassing. If you don't leave immediately, he's going to shoot you as trespassers. Apparently, you can do that in Brazil. What was the word he used? Obviously in Portuguese, I will remove you with bullets. He said he will remove you with bullets. Sounds very violent. And of course they get very alarmed. But Fox holds his ground. Says, can I ask him one question? He says, no. He doesn't want to talk to you. And then the guy says, I am Eric Lepech. Turns out the guy at the window was not a friend. He was Eric Lepech, and there is a shot of him. You can actually see Eric Lepech. And what's more, he's holding a pistol in his hand. So yeah, it gets a bit hairy at that point, doesn't it? Yeah. And I suppose, why? It's so interesting this guy won't talk to the media. Now, he may have heard rumours that there was these guys going around town, so he may have recognised Fox when Fox approached, and he said, I don't want to talk about the ET business. But it's interesting he volunteered that information immediately before anyone even asked. I mean, he didn't say, who are you? What do you want? Then they'd have replied, we're here about the alien from 1996. And some buggers somebody in the house. I don't know what they're doing. I think it's one of my housemates' friends. I hope it's not disturbing things. Makes a change from Liberace, doesn't it? But I'd have said something like, what do you want? Who are you? And then he said, well, we're here about the aliens. And he said, and then I'd have said, no, I don't want to talk about aliens. Lepech actually said straight away, if you hear about the alien business, I don't want to talk about it. So either he must have known in advance when these people approached why they were there. He may have heard rumours. He may have got wind of the attempt to track him down. It may be that he anticipated them. So why make such a fuss? Why is it? If this isn't real, what's the problem? Because according to skeptics, this is not real. It's all a big fantasy that's been exaggerated over the years, and it's become a kind of what's it, a UFO myth, which of course is now become very lucrative because there are UFO museums in Virginia. Someone actually put a comment on my article I wrote here, which is very interesting, which I'll talk about here. He said this. He said, "I think your review is fairly accurate, Ben. From my perspective, not as a skeptic, as that suggests I'm looking to pick holes, but as somebody on the fence, as in I certainly believe people are seeing and having experiences that cannot be easily explained. It hasn't presented anything new beyond witness testimony of something very strange happening to them. My concern is this will be lapped up by UFO believers as more proof, without any proof existing, and making people such as myself less likely to dig deeper and brushing it off as another grift by a filmmaker cashing in on a story who should be trying to establish that proof exists, or it doesn't even if that annoys the UFO community. Sorry, there's no punctuation here. Trying to establish that proof exists, or it doesn't, even if that annoys the UFO community. The simple truth is not everyone can be making up what they see, but if people can make money from it, they will be more tempted to do so, especially if they can embellish it without any proof. That's why we see the town embracing the story in the same way as Roswell. Oh, I've already covered that, the whole Shakespeare thing. This is why films like this will keep getting produced, hyped up to the target audience, who are willing to pay over the odds to view it as it promises something new. Okay, well, I did put a little written reply here. I didn't really cover all his points actually, so I'll do that now. He's right that people are having genuine experiences. I said that, but he uses terms like lapped up by UFO believers as more untrue proof without proof existing. Well, I mean, I don't want anyone to lap this up, and lapping up is a very loaded term. It implies they're just, swallowing it blindly. Say, oh my God, there's more UFO stuff. It's real, it's real, it's real. No, I want people to approach this subject in an analytical manner. Skeptical with a C, or skeptical with a small s, if you like. And I think this seems to be what's happening. And he uses a lot of other rhetoric here. He says brushing it off as another grift by a filmmaker, cashing in on the story, who should be trying to establish that proof. Yeah, well, proof exists, or it doesn't, even if that annoys the UFO community. Okay, well, maybe if communities in quotes as well. Now, I hope that if James Fox had gone there and discovered it had all been some massive hoax, he would have said so in his film, or cancelled the film even. But that doesn't seem to be the way he handled himself. He seemed to handle this as an investigation. He seemed literally to go there saying, I want to find out what happened. And he did actually treat it in a very... I think his attitude was actually very scientific. Another grift by a filmmaker cashing in on a story. Why is it people accuse filmmakers of grifting when they make films about UFOs? If I was a filmmaker and I wanted to grift, i.e. make money by any means necessary and make a film about something which I didn't really care about, I didn't care what it was so long as it made money, I'd make a film about the LGBTQ phenomenon or a pro-woke documentary about how evil white men are and things like this. That if you want to make money and be successful, that's what you do. You make a film about how evil white people are, how evil men are, oppression and things like that. That's what you do if you want to grift. That's what Jordan Peele did with Get Out, let's face it. I mean, as I said, he seems to know it as well. So why didn't James Fox go off and make one of those documentaries? No, he's focused on something, on a subject matter which is much more risky in terms of gaining any success than something which is possibly more popular. He didn't focus on. He focused on something on a subject which is less popular for now. Because I think he has. I do think he's genuine. I think he has a true interest in this. The simple truth is not everyone can be making up what they see, but if people can make money from it, they'll be more tempted to do so. Yes, you see, this is why. You see, there are some of the witnesses you do have to wonder. Military X, for example. His story, I don't know. His story cannot be verified at this moment. It doesn't mean he's making it up. It's just it can't be verified at this moment. There is the photograph, the very interesting photograph. But what's the... I think I still think, assuming, a paradigm of prevention, just assuming that Military X is making it up, he's just jumping on the bandwagon. The way, let's face it, a lot of the Roswell witnesses, I think, have done that. Especially some of the more recent ones, I think, are a little bit dodgy. And the same goes for other events as well. I don't think that we should necessarily jump to that conclusion, though. Despite that, and Fox spent a lot of time with this guy. They met him in a bar. They spoke for a long time, so they already kind of knew each other before the interview took place. The fact that he wants to remain anonymous obviously means that if Fox has identified him and verified his identity, which would help to verify his story, then he can't say so at this moment. That might change. This is why films like this will keep getting produced, hyped up to the target audience who are willing to pay over the odds to view it as it promises something new. Well, again, hyped up over the odds. I think $9.99 on Amazon Prime is actually pretty reasonable for what you get. As I said, I'd prefer it if there was like a $2.99 rental option, as there was with Phenomenon. I don't know why there wasn't, but as a purchase, that's not bad. That's not bad as a purchase at all. Now, I want to go on to a little bit further, because the big mystery in Military X was actually, I think I finished with those notes now. Military X was actually asked about this. What happened afterwards? For example, what happened? There was film footage that was made because he went into the hospital and there was a guy with a film camera, and we don't know what happened to that footage. Presumably it shows the alien. Now, what happened was the ESA, that's the academy where the alien was stored. It was taken from Humanitas Hospital to the ESA. The ESA is in a town which I will not try to pronounce. As I said, Brazilian has Portuguese has tricky phonetics. It's TC. The two words begin with TC. I'm not going to try and pronounce it, but that's where ESA was. Now, clearly, new orders came about because then the following night, the aliens were driven overnight to a place in Campinas. It's a military base in Campinas with an airfield. And then there's an interview with a guy from Brazilian Air Traffic Control he stands there quite openly in daylight. He's interviewed with there's Fox talking there. There's the attractive translator, and they're talking to each other live on video. And he said that a U.S. Air Force, this is where it gets interesting, a U.S. Air Force transporter plane landed at Campinas, at this military base in Campinas. Campinas is just north, if you look at it on the map, you can find it, it's a large city just northwest of Sao Paulo. This is where it's interesting. It landed without authorization. Now, that is remarkable. And this ties in with what Timothy Good said, because Timothy Good met some people who were actually Brazilians, who were actually really put out that the Americans had just waded in and taken over the way they had. It's very sort of humiliating when that happens. It's not what they're used to. These are high-level military intelligence officials. They're not used to foreign governments just coming in and taking over. It's insulting. And so this transporter plane landed without authorization from the Brazilian government, or at least no authorization was publicly announced at the level he was at, which is air traffic control. And we don't know what actually happened, but I mean, you can probably work out that probably the alien bodies were then taken on board that plane and flown to the United States, to one of the secret bases there, Area 51, etc., one of those bases. Now, what happened? Obviously, then it's gone secret. It's probably still in storage at one of those bases. Excuse me. So that matches with what Timothy Good was talking about in his book. Now, the Brazilian government has issued a full denial of this whole event. They have issued a public statement on this, saying no alien vehicle or creatures were captured in Virginia on this date. They've categorically denied it. Now, this is interesting, isn't it? Because that's happened before. In 2011, Grant Cameron's petition to the White House. They said we have had no program to investigate UFOs since 1969 with the closure of Project Blue Book. A lie. We know because ATIP/ORSAP was operating from 2007 onwards, at least. So I'm afraid I have to. There's no way I'm going to take this denial by the Brazilian government at face value. Absolutely no way at all. Now, it's as I said, Brazil tends to get the dodgy cases. It does. By dodgy, I mean harmful. Aliens that are toxic, aliens that are dangerous. They do horrible things to people. There's a lot of mutes that happen in their animal and human. There's the famous reservoir case, which some people think was vultures. I doubt that. There's not far from there. More recently, there was a young girl found. David Caton has got photos of those. If you ever watch David Caton's lecture, be warned, it's quite graphic. It's not just cows and pigs and dolphins. He films. It's humans who have the same injuries. Yeah, very. It's and there's Colares. Now, Colares, of course, was a case in which a large number of people were injured or killed by this phenomenon, which the government, this Colonel Hollander was leading this project called Operation Saucer. Interestingly, but the local doctor is speaking out to this day about what's the injury she saw on people. The fact that people had blood loss. There were no wounds on the skin apart from some marks, but they had, somehow some of the blood had been taken from them. Colares is the name mentioned on the. Do you remember I think it was either one of the previous UFO disclosure videos I did. I'm going to do another one of those about the alien in the jar. Do you remember the film of the alien in the jar? That apparently came from Colares. I honestly think Brazil is like Brazil could be where it's at right now. I'll tell you, in terms of disclosure. I mean, now a lot's happened in Brazil since I watched this film. There's been a bit of an upheaval. There was an election, the presidential election took place, in which Jair Bolsonaro was apparently removed from office. Although it appears that there's scenes not unlike the January the 6th incident in the United States, because Bolsonaro himself and a large proportion of the population are not accepting the results of this election. I haven't been following it in great detail. Unfortunately, it's one of these things I should be looking into and haven't had the time. But I will check. I will go into more detail about this and find out exactly what's going on. Because Bolsonaro seems to have been something of a Trumpian figure. He did a lot of good. He's done a lot of good for Brazil in many different ways, socially, economically, environmentally, etc. But there was also this high-level UFO event which Gary Hazeltine attended in Brazil a few months ago. Now, the apparent winner of the election, a guy called Jura, he's currently fighting Bolsonaro's challenge to the election. This situation, this political situation in Brazil, could have a positive effect on the disclosure process or a negative one. I'm not sure which. But if this film's just come out, Brazil seems to be a place where there's an abundance of UFO evidence. And even though some of that evidence is quite scary, it's still worth looking at. There's the leak of this jar video, which I talked about in the UFO disclosure video that I just did. One thing that Bolsonaro could do, if he's really determined to hang on to his presidency, which he believes has been removed from him unfairly, drop the UFO files. Drop them. Be the disclosure president of Brazil. That's right. If you're watching this, Mr. Bolsonaro, I think you should. That is what I advise you to do. Not that he watches my channel, but you never know. So, we'll have to see what happens. But anyway, this is the review. This is the middle of the Watch Party trilogy format that I have. This is the review. Now the review's done, the next stage is the live stream, and that will be coming soon. Now, in the description box, you'll find a link to the introduction to this video, to this particular Watch Party, and pretty soon there will be a link to the live stream. Although the live stream will actually occur I'll put up, obviously I'll do the usual, put up the live stream notice beforehand. Okay, so keep an eye out for that. But the next stage, watch party live stream. I don't know when that'll be. I have other videos planned. I need to do another UFO disclosure video. I know that's actually on the cards. So, and also, I think we're due for a comments reply. I think in fact then my next one will probably have to be a comments reply. Otherwise, the comments are just going to get away from me because it's been quite a long time. Even though my upload rate over the last couple of weeks has been lower, I've only had about 3 videos. The comments still build up. So probably my next video in the next few days will be a comments reply video. So keep an eye on the channel. Look out for the live stream. Look out for the comments reply video and all the other videos I have planned. Thank you for watching Hapanwo TV. Hospital Porters, Pride and Dignity. Stop the New World Order.